something extra endearing about owls. So this is Miami. Miami is indeed from Miami, Florida originally, and he is an eastern screech owl. Now, I get a lot of questions about him when he comes out because he is so tiny. I'm holding him a little bit closer to the camera so you can see him, but this is his actual size, like next to my shoulder. Is he a baby? And the answer is no, he is not a baby. He is fully grown. In fact, Miami is 8 years old this year, and that's, again, kind of up there for a wild screech owl. He is also not a great horned owl, although he shares an important feature with great horned owls, which is the horns, these two little tufts of feathers that you see on top of his head. Now, those tufts of feathers, sometimes they're called ear tufts, but that's really misleading because they're not ears at all. They're not even next to his ears. Owl ears, and this is true across the board, are all on either side of their head, just like our ears are. They're just behind and below the eye. For Miami, our eastern screech owl, you can see this kind of dark parenthesis on the side of his face, just sort of bordering his eye. His ear openings is right in front of that. So this ear canal begins underneath the feathers that are right in front of that kind of curve on the side of his face. So what are those horns for, if not for his ears? Well, if you take a look at Miami's patterning all over his body, he has these beautiful, really intricate kind of fractal-like patterns to the gray feathers that are all over him. And this, as you might be imagining, is all about camouflage. If he were sitting up against the trunk of a maple tree or a beech tree at twilight or at dawn, and he had closed his eyes because he was just getting ready to go to sleep, he would be completely invisible, wouldn't he? Very excellent camouflage. But there are circumstances where a screech owl like this might not be right up against the bark of a big tree. Maybe he's out on the end of a branch and he feels the need to hide. Some predator has just walked by below him or flown through the sky nearby. So he's going to stick those two tufts of feathers straight up in the air and look for all the world like a broken off piece of branch. And it's pretty effective, actually. And your eyes, despite how good our human vision is, might just gloss right over him because, hey, it's just a piece of bark sitting on the end of a branch. That's not necessarily a real bird. That's exactly what he's counting on. Because being so small, as eastern screech owls all are, they are not only predators in their environment, but they're also prey. There are things that they need to watch out for that might want to eat him. But believe it or not, he is a predator. He's a vital part of the forest ecosystem where he lives, eating everything he can get his little talons around. That's mice, that's frogs, that's other amphibians like salamanders, that's small birds, it's insects, it's even aquatic invertebrates. He might come across a crayfish or a bug that's in the water and eat that. Delicious. Maybe it's a moth or a caterpillar. Anything he can find is going down in the gullet. So these little guys are what we might refer to as a keystone species within their ecosystem. Not only are they consuming prey animals, but they're also food for other things farther up the food chain. They fall right in the middle there. Now, eastern screech owls are nocturnal, like many owls are. Not all owls, interestingly enough, are nocturnal, but eastern screech owls are nocturnal. And so they're needing to use a lot of their hunting skills at night. So many of an owl's adaptations have to do with seeing well or detecting the world well at night. He's got gigantic eyeballs. Those eyes that you see right there, they're not much bigger than my eyeballs are themselves, but proportionally, they take up 2/3 of the space in his head. And those eyes are like big windows. The bigger the window you have, the more light can come into the room. The bigger the eyeball you have, the more light he can detect and process. But there are certain times of year for an eastern screech owl, like right now, when we don't have 13 feet. We have 6 inches or so of snow on the ground, where he's not able to see the mice who are living in the subnivean zone, living underneath the snow in tunnels that they've dug and built themselves. So he needs to use another sense to detect those animals, or he needs to migrate. Owls don't migrate. What they do is they can hear the sounds of the mouse footsteps underneath the snow. those borders of feathers to his ears, they act just like this flap of skin and cartilage that we have does. It's a satellite dish that gathers sound from the world. You may have seen some pictures of other owls with tremendous, huge dishes on their face. That is what they use to gather in those tiny little noises and detect the sound of a mouse under 6 inches of snow that's 50 feet away from them. Pretty impressive. And it's how these little guys survive the cold, harsh winter without leaving to go somewhere else like our hawk and our falcon do. So they brave the temperatures. Now, Miami here is not expected to brave any temperatures of Vermont, being a Floridian screech owl. He is actually a subspecies that is unique to Florida, and he's even smaller than a northern screech owl would be. If you think he's small, he's actually himself kind of a runt of a screech owl. These guys live down in Florida, and they nest in trees, cavities, similar to us here. And that's exactly where Miami was when he was very young, inside of a hole in a big dead tree on someone's property. And they decided in the middle of spring that they were going to cut down this dead tree because they didn't want it anymore. And down came the tree, and down came Miami and his entire little family. Fortunately, the forester recognized immediately what had happened, and he scooped up the little screech owl family and brought them to a wildlife rehabilitator down there. That rehabilitator gave them a full checkup and discovered that even though his brothers and sisters were just fine, they were doing great, Miami had damaged his right eye. Probably when the tree fell, he maybe hit his head really hard, and he can no longer see out of his right eye. So his left eye is the one pointing at you at the camera right now. If I move my finger on the right side of his face, he doesn't really react. But if I move around to the left side of his, immediate reaction going on over here. And so the rehabilitator determined that he would be at a major disadvantage if he were released into the wild. Some owls can compensate for a lack of visual ability with their hearing, but not such a tiny little bird as a screech owl, because they not only have to look for food, they have to look for predators too. So Miami was placed with us. And like I said, he's 8 years old now, doing very, very well. In fact, he sort of has a little girlfriend. He has a neighbor back and forth to each other. They make their traditional little screech owl whinnies. He goes, "Ooh." And since his girlfriend moved in next door, I've never heard him so vocal in his life. It's really brought out his personality.